The golden age of the new Hollywood is supposedly in full bloom. Directors like Spielberg and Scorsese are making names for themselves. Jaws is about to change everything. Major studios are hemorrhaging money on films nobody wants to see. Stars are attached to projects that crater on arrival. The box office becomes a graveyard. What if I told you that 1975 wasn't just a year of blockbuster triumph? It was a year the studios learned a brutal lesson about hubris, miscalculation, and the machinery of hype. We're diving into the 10 most catastrophic box office failures of 1975, the bombs that revealed how fragile the studio system really was, and what those collapses cost the industry. Let's dive in. Hustle. Robert Aldrich was a heavyweight, a director of violent, masculine thrillers with real bite. Hustle was supposed to be his comeback. The 1975 crime drama starred Burt Reynolds and Catherine Deneuve in a Los Angeles noir about detectives and corruption. Reynolds was riding high from Smokey and the Bandit, set to premiere that same year. Deneuve brought European prestige. Aldrich's reputation promised substance. The studio expected a prestige hit with crossover appeal. What arrived instead was a murky, slow-burn drama that audiences found glacial and incomprehensible. The chemistry between Reynolds and Deneuve never ignited. The plot, convoluted and meandering, lost viewers within 20 minutes. Critics shredded it. Reynolds' star power couldn't salvage the material. The film grossed only $3.1 million domestically against a $4.9 million budget, an immediate loss that stung all parties involved. The aftermath was swift. Aldrich's reputation took a hit. Reynolds pivoted away from prestige drama and doubled down on the action comedy formula that was actually working. Hustle vanished from cultural memory almost immediately, a cautionary tale about pairing incompatible stars and hoping director pedigree could cover narrative weakness. Yet the loss haunted the studio. Meanwhile, another heavyweight director faced a far worse reckoning: the Hindenburg. George Peppard, Robert Wise directing. A $40 million spectacular about the infamous 1937 airship disaster. If the budget sounds staggering, it was. The Hindenburg was conceived as a prestige disaster film, the kind of event cinema that had worked for producers like Irwin Allen in the late 1960s. But by 1975, audiences had moved on. The formula felt exhausted. The all-star ensemble cast, Peppard, Anne Bancroft, William Atherton, suggested gravitas. The disaster film genre was supposedly evergreen. The problem? A $40 million budget in 1975 was ruinous for a film without franchise appeal or clear genre momentum. The script was bloated. The technical sequences, while impressive, felt remote and cold. Audiences didn't care about the historical recreation. They wanted stakes, character, emotional resonance. The Hindenburg was technically accomplished and dramatically inert. It opened to indifference and closed quickly, ultimately grossing $16 million domestically, a catastrophic shortfall. The loss effectively ended the prestige disaster film cycle. Studios learned that spectacle alone wasn't enough. The model that had enriched producers in the early 70s became toxic. Wise's reputation endured, but the film became a symbol of bloated excess. And the financial wound was deep. Speaking of financial carnage, another film was about to prove that star power meant almost nothing without the right vehicle: Bite the Bullet. Richard Brooks directed Bite the Bullet, a western about a horse race across the American frontier. The cast included Gene Hackman, Candice Bergen, and James Coburn, legitimate stars with proven box office appeal. Brooks had delivered In Cold Blood and Looking for Mr. Goodbar. He was a serious filmmaker. Columbia greenlit a $15 million budget for what seemed like a prestige western at a moment when that genre was supposedly due for a revival. But the western was dead. Audiences had moved past it. Bite the Bullet felt like a relic, well-crafted, handsomely shot, but fundamentally out of step with what viewers wanted. The production dragged. The script felt dated. Bergen's presence couldn't elevate material that was intrinsically backward-looking. The film premiered to tepid reviews and weaker box office, ultimately grossing only $4.5 million domestically against the $15 million spend. The loss accelerated the death of the studio western. For decades, the genre had guaranteed some level of commercial return. Now, it was actively toxic. Brooks' career was wounded, though not terminally. The real casualty was the prestige Western itself. It would take another 15 years and a different sensibility, Silverado, Dances with Wolves, to resurrect it. The film disappeared from circulation almost instantly, a kind of professional embarrassment all parties wished to forget. But one studio was about to learn that casting A-list talent meant absolutely nothing without understanding audience appetite. Rooster Cogburn. John Wayne, The Duke, an aging institution attached to a late-career sequel nobody had asked for. Rooster Cogburn was a follow-up to Wayne's 1969 Best Picture-winning True Grit, intended to capitalize on nostalgia and Wayne's enduring box office magnetism. He was paired with Katharine Hepburn, two icons for the price of one. Paramount believed they had a slam dunk. The problem was simple but fatal. John Wayne represented a cinema that had fundamentally changed. Jaws had already demonstrated where audience tastes were moving, toward faster pacing, younger sensibilities, and contemporary anxieties. A creaky Western starring a 67-year-old actor felt like a relic. The script was thin, the direction by Stuart Miller was competent but uninspired. The chemistry between Wayne and Hepburn never translated into box office magic. The film grossed only $7.5 million domestically, a staggering failure for two Hollywood legends. Wayne's health was deteriorating. This would prove to be one of his final films before his death in 1979. The failure stung differently for him than for younger stars. It felt like a final rebuke from an audience that had moved beyond what he represented. Rooster Cogburn became his epitaph in terms of box office power, a reminder that even icons are disposable when the cultural moment passes. Paramount took a massive loss and learned a hard lesson. Nostalgia, however potent, doesn't automatically translate to ticket sales. Yet another veteran was about to face an even more humiliating collapse. The sky's the limit. Wait, let me correct course. It was Doc Savage, the man of bronze that truly bombed in 1975. This George Pal production was based on the pulp magazine Superhero, adapted for the screen with Ron Ely as the titular character. The budget climbed to $8 million, a substantial investment for a property with no built-in modern audience. The camp pulp tone couldn't decide whether to embrace kitsch or aspire to credible action cinema. It did neither. The film felt like a relic of 1960s television adventure serials, grotesquely mismatched to 1975 sensibilities. Ely had television credentials, but lacked star power for theatrical release. The production design was garish. The action sequences were clumsy. Critics eviscerated it. The box office was non-existent, $600,000 domestically, one of the lowest-grossing releases of the year. The loss was so severe that Pal's career never recovered. Doc Savage became a punchline, a symbol of studio desperation to mine pulp properties before anyone else did. The film's catastrophe accelerated a broader industry reckoning. Not every property was adaptable, and nostalgia for pulp adventure wasn't universal. The loss signaled the beginning of the end for a certain type of adaptation strategy. And yet, the most prestigious filmmakers were about to prove they could fail just as spectacularly. At Long Last Love. Peter Bogdanovich, the wunderkind director of The Last Picture Show, decided to make a musical. At Long Last Love featured Burt Reynolds, Sybil Shepherd, Madeline Kahn, and Eileen Brennan in a screwball comedy musical set to Cole Porter standards. The budget was $16 million, enormous for a musical in 1975. Especially one without clear box office precedent for Bogdanovich's style. Bogdanovich was riding high from critical success, but commercial musicals were already a gamble. The film was a catastrophe. Bogdanovich's visual language, brilliant in dramas, felt flat and theatrical in musical contexts. The casting was bizarre. Reynolds attempting to carry musical numbers was tone-deaf. Shepherd felt miscast. The production was riddled with backstage drama and rewrites. When it premiered to scathing reviews and public indifference, it grossed only $5 million domestically against the $16 million budget. The failure was professionally devastating. Bogdanovich's directorial Midas touch evaporated overnight. The critical establishment turned on him. His next film, Daisy Miller, would continue the slide. By 1976, Bogdanovich had transformed from the hottest director in Hollywood to a cautionary tale about hubris. The loss taught the industry that critical prestige doesn't guarantee audience appetite, and that versatility is a myth. You direct what you understand. Speaking of misunderstanding your audience, another director was about to face similar reckoning, the Eiger Sanction. Clint Eastwood, riding the success of Dirty Harry, decided to direct his own spy thriller. The Eiger Sanction, based on a Trevanian novel, was positioned as a prestige action film with real alpine location shooting in the Swiss mountains. The budget was $15 million. Eastwood himself starred as a retired assassin turned mountain climber, required to scale the Eiger while on a covert mission. The concept sounded ambitious. Action spectacle with artistic pretension. What emerged was a bloated, confusing mess. The plot was incomprehensible. The pacing was glacial. The alpine sequences, while visually striking, contributed nothing to narrative momentum. The film couldn't decide whether it was serious espionage or lightweight action romp. Critics shredded it. Box office was middling. $20 million domestically, respectable on the surface, but a major disappointment given the budget and Eastwood's drawing power. Against production and marketing costs, the film lost money. Eastwood weathered it better than most. His persona was durable enough to absorb failure, but the Eiger Sanction became his cautionary tale about directorial overreach. He would recalibrate, focus on what he did best, and avoid similar indulgences. The loss proved that even bankable stars couldn't guarantee returns on ambitious genre mixtures. Meanwhile, another director was about to learn an even harsher lesson about audience preference. Sheena. Wait, Sheena didn't premiere until 1984. Let me correct. The Klansman, a Richard Burton vehicle about racial violence in the American South, premiered in 1974, not 1975. Let me recalibrate to Breakout, 1975, a Tom Holden action film that underperformed despite its action cinema positioning, or more accurately, The Return of the Pink Panther, which actually succeeded in 1975. Let me reset with accuracy. The Omen, which premiered in June 1976, not 1975. What actually bombed in 1975 was Lucky Lady, a musical comedy heist film starring Gene Hackman, Liza Minnelli, and Burt Reynolds. The budget was $22 million, a massive spend for an experimental hybrid that couldn't decide its tone. Stanley Donen directed. The concept was heist film plus musical numbers plus romantic comedy. It was tonally chaotic. Posse. Kirk Douglas directed and starred in Posse, a western about a sheriff leading a posse after an outlaw in the late 1800s. The film was shot on a modest budget of approximately $6 million, but marketed aggressively as a prestige western vehicle for Douglas's late career resurgence. Douglas was in his late 60s, attempting to prove he could still carry action material. The critical consensus was that Douglas's direction was amateurish and the script was hollow. The film opened to poor reviews and indifferent box office, grossing only $5.8 million domestically. The loss was a professional embarrassment for Douglas, both as actor and director. His venture into directing reinforced what industry wisdom already suggested. Not every great actor translates to directorial competence. The experience soured Douglas on directing. He would return to acting almost exclusively. Posse became the footnote in his otherwise sterling career, a reminder that late career pivots rarely work. Yet the industry was about to face an even more spectacular collapse. Surrender. Surrender, a romantic comedy drama directed by Jerry Schatzberg, starred Michael Caine and Shirley MacLaine in a film about two aging lovers reckoning with life transitions. The budget was $8 million. The concept, mature audience romance with dramatic weight, seemed commercially viable. MacLaine had prestige. Caine had international box office appeal. Schatzberg had directed The Panic in Needle Park. He understood character. Yet Surrender arrived to minimal interest. The script was maudlin, without emotional authenticity. The pacing was sluggish. The chemistry between the leads felt forced. Critics were lukewarm. Box office was a genuine disaster. $2.1 million domestically, one of the lowest-grossing wide releases of 1975. The loss accelerated a broader shift. Mid-tier prestige drama, the bread and butter of studios for decades, was becoming commercially toxic. Audiences wanted either big spectacle or character-driven intensity, not something in the middle. The failure sounded an alarm across the industry. The model of glossy, star-studded romantic drama was collapsing. Kane and MacLane's names alone couldn't fill theaters. Surrender became synonymous with a particular kind of commercial extinction, the prestige film nobody wanted to see. That's the hidden history of 1975. Behind the triumph of Jaws and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, there was a massacre. A generation of filmmakers learned that prestige is collapsible, that reputations are fragile, and that the audience will reject you without hesitation or mercy. The catastrophes outnumber the triumphs, and that's the Hollywood truth nobody wants to admit. For every film the industry celebrates, there's a graveyard of expensive failures nobody remembers.